You wake up and the sky is just as white as it was yesterday. It's not fog, it's dust. You haven't seen a real cloud in months, the kind that brings rain. The well in the plaza is almost dry, and the corn won't grow past your knee. You look at the temples your grandparents built, and it clicks. The secret behind the end of your world isn't going to be a war or the wrath of a god. It's going to be thirst. That scene isn't from a movie. It's the conclusion an increasing number of paleoclimate studies are reaching about the collapse of some of history's greatest civilizations. The great secret behind why entire cities vanished, more often than not, has nothing to do with alien invasions or sudden catastrophes. It has to do with climate. With something as simple and as terrible as a drought that lasts too long. But that's not the only answer. Because for other civilizations, the secret is the exact opposite, that they never actually collapsed the way we were told. And there's one case, Easter Island, that completely upends the story we all thought we knew. Today, we're breaking down the data that's rewriting the past. Let's start with the most famous case, the Maya. Between the 8th and 9th centuries, one of the most advanced cultures of its time fell apart. Cities that had once housed thousands of people were left empty. And for decades, the question has been why. To this day, as many as 88 different theories have been proposed to explain it. 88. That alone gives you a sense of how complex this issue is. The idea of a single cause, one apocalyptic event, is appealing, but it's false. What the data actually show is a perfect storm of factors, but one of them is gaining more and more weight. A 2018 study, published in the journal Arqueología Mexicana, called it one of the most severe demographic disasters in human history. Millions of people died. The southern lowlands of the Maya civilization never recovered their previous population levels. The main culprit, according to sediment and cave analyses, was a series of extreme droughts, not a dry summer decades of drought. The climate shift of the era reduced rainfall, directly hitting agriculture, which was the foundation of everything. No corn means no food. No food means people grow desperate, fight over what's left, or simply leave. The great cities, dependent on a steady food supply, became unsustainable. What we're looking at isn't a civilization that vanished overnight, but a system that slowly shut down, region by region, over the course of a century. And behind it all, the same engine, climate. This pattern repeats itself elsewhere in the world, sometimes even more brutally. Let's head to India and Pakistan, to a civilization that flourished millennia before the Maya, the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Harappa. Here, we're talking about an incredibly sophisticated urban culture. They built planned cities like Harappa and MOHENJO-DARO, with straight streets and drainage systems that ancient Rome wouldn't have for centuries. At its peak, this civilization had a population of 5 million people. 5 million. And then, it too went into decline. For a long time, people assumed invasions or internal conflict were to blame. But once again, climate science has upended the story. Recent research, covered by outlets like La Vanguardia in 2025, analyzed sediment layers in the region. And what did they find? Droughts, but not ordinary droughts. The study describes dry spells lasting more than 85 years. Imagine 2 or 3 generations being born and dying without ever seeing a normal monsoon season. One drought peaked around 1733 BCE and lasted 164 years. No agricultural civilization can survive that. Cities were abandoned, people migrated toward wetter regions, and one of the most advanced cultures of the Bronze Age dissolved. Its secret wasn't hidden inside some temple, it was written in the dust, in the rain that never came. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating connections. The late Bronze Age collapse, around 1200 BCE, was an event that shook the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Powerful kingdoms like the Hittites and the Mycenaeans fell, trade routes were severed, and multiple cities were destroyed. Historian Robert Drews describes it as one of the worst disasters in ancient history, even more catastrophic than the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The causes are numerous: earthquakes, migrations by the so-called sea peoples, systemic crises, and once again, climate change that triggered famines. What's fascinating is that some scholars suggest the cultural memory of this massive collapse and advanced world coming apart may have influenced Plato's accounts of Atlantis. The idea of a lost civilization, swallowed by disaster, might not be pure myth, but the distant echo of a real historical catastrophe. This teaches us something fundamental. Often, the secret of a lost civilization is that it was never really lost, just forgotten, and sometimes, not even that. Sometimes the secret is literally right under our feet, waiting to be found. In 2026, archaeologists announced the discovery of a lost civilization in the Amazon. Using laser technology, they mapped 20,000 hidden structures beneath the rainforest. 20,000. This isn't a village, it's an entire network of cities and towns that completely transforms our understanding of what the Amazon looked like before Europeans arrived. We assumed it was an empty, untouched wilderness, and it turns out it was a domesticated, densely populated landscape. But not every secret is about collapse. Some are about a level of knowledge that, frankly, shouldn't exist for its time. And the best example of that is in Turkey. It's called Göbekli Tepe. This site is quite possibly the most important archaeological discovery of the last century. It's a complex of massive stone pillars, some standing more than 16 feet tall, carved with reliefs of animals. What's incredible isn't just its size or its artwork, it's its age. Göbekli Tepe is roughly 11,000 years old. That puts it around 9,000 BCE. Let's put that in perspective. It's 6,000 years older than the pyramids of Egypt. It predates the invention of the wheel, of writing, of pottery, and most importantly, it predates the invention of agriculture. The classic theory holds that humans first developed agriculture, then settled into villages and cities, and only afterward, with surplus food and labor, began building large religious monuments. Göbekli Tepe turns that timeline upside down. The people who built this temple were hunter-gatherers, nomadic groups who somehow organized themselves to carve, transport, and raise tens of tons of stone. This suggests that the drive to build a shared sacred site may have been the very thing that pushed people towards settling down and developing agriculture, not the other way around. The religious or social impulse came first. It's an idea that reshapes our whole understanding of how civilization began. And this kind of advanced knowledge wasn't limited to construction. Ancient medicine holds surprises too. In India, around 500 BCE, complex plastic surgery procedures were already being performed, including rhinoplasty to reconstruct noses. But what's most striking is how they closed the wounds. They used Bengali ants. Surgeons would bring an ant to the edges of the wound, let it bite down with its powerful pincers, and then cut off its body, leaving the head behind to act as a natural surgical staple. An ingenious, effective technique thousands of years before modern sutures. This kind of lost knowledge fascinates us because it challenges our idea of linear progress. We like to believe we're always improving, that modern technology represents the pinnacle, and then you run into Roman concrete. Engineers today hope modern concrete will last around 150 to 200 years under the best conditions. The concrete the Romans used to build the Pantheon or their aqueducts has lasted more than 2,000 years, often in direct contact with salt water, and it's still standing. The secret? It seems to come down to their use of volcanic ash and a manufacturing process that allowed the material to self-heal. When small cracks formed, water seeping in would react with minerals in the concrete and form new crystals that filled the gap. It was a living material, a technology lost when the empire fell, and one we're only now beginning to understand. Or consider the Iron Pillar of Delhi, a column over 23 feet tall and 1,600 years old, exposed to the elements this entire time, with almost no corrosion to show for it. Its purity and the way it was forged created a protective layer of passive oxide that has kept it nearly intact. Try leaving a modern iron beam out in the open in a monsoon-prone city and see what happens after 20 years. This is the kind of fact that forces us to be humbler about the past. We tend to think of ancient civilizations as primitive, but in certain fields, they develop solutions we still struggle to replicate today. And that brings us back to the case we promised at the start, the one that changes everything. Because it shows us that sometimes the biggest secret is that we've been telling the story wrong all along. Let's talk about Easter Island, Rapa Nui. The story most of us know is a moral fable, an isolated civilization that, in its obsession with building the Moai statues, cut down every tree on the island, causing soil erosion, agricultural collapse, civil war, and cannibalism. A story of self-destruction through overexploitation of resources. An ecocide. It's a powerful narrative, and it served as a cautionary tale for decades. The problem is, according to newer research, it might be false. More recent studies, including one highlighted by the Faculty of Biological Sciences at Chile's Pontifical Catholic University, and another covered by Infobay in 2024, are dismantling this ecocide narrative. Analysis of ancient pollen, for instance, shows that deforestation was a much slower and more complex process than previously thought. And more importantly, the Rapa Nui population didn't die out in a spiral of violence, they adapted. They developed clever agricultural techniques, like rock gardens, where stones were placed to shield crops from the wind and retain soil moisture. They transformed their beliefs and their social structure. Moai construction slowed down, but life went on. There was no massive population collapse before Europeans arrived. So, what was the real end of Rapa Nui civilization? Contact. Starting in the 18th century, European ships brought diseases the islanders had no defenses against. And worse, in the 19th century, the Peruvian slave trade abducted a huge portion of the population, including many of the elders who held onto ancestral knowledge. That was a collapse. Fast and brutal. So, the secret of Easter Island isn't a fable about human stupidity, it's a tragedy about the devastating impact of colonialism. And we see this same pattern, a civilization that adapts and survives, only to eventually be struck down by an outside force in other places too. In Peru, the Corral civilization, the oldest in the Americas, flourished about 3,500 years ago. It was a peaceful society. No weapons or defensive walls have been found in its cities. Its end, according to a 2025 Muy Interesante article, was also tied to climate. Droughts and torrential rains linked to phenomena like El Niño made life unsustainable. And people abandoned centers like the city of Peñico. They adapted, they migrated, they didn't destroy each other. These discoveries matter. They force us to look at the past with more nuance and less judgment. And this work of rewriting history, piece by piece, fact by fact, takes enormous effort that depends on research and outreach. Getting back to technology, there's one artifact that sums up this whole idea of lost knowledge better than any other: the Antikythera mechanism. Found in an ancient Greek shipwreck, it's essentially an astronomical calculator from the 2nd century BCE, a bronze device with astonishingly complex gears used to predict eclipses and the positions of the planets. Its level of precision and miniaturization wasn't matched again anywhere in the world until the arrival of astronomical clocks in Europe in the 14th century, 1500 years later. How did they build it? We don't know. There are no surviving texts describing its construction. It's a technological leap that seems to appear out of nowhere and vanish just as suddenly. It shows us that there have been flashes of technical brilliance throughout history that simply didn't carry forward. That progress isn't a straight line climbing upward, but a series of peaks and valleys. And this is where all the threads come together. The droughts that brought down the Maya, the lost knowledge of the Romans, the misremembered history of Rapa Nui, the impossible temple at Göbekli Tepe, they all point to the same conclusion. Civilizations are fragile systems. Far more fragile than we like to think. We believe in permanence. We build cities, accumulate knowledge, raise up empires, assuming they'll last. But history shows us again and again that a shift in rainfall patterns, the loss of a key technology, or contact with an outside force can dismantle in a single century what took 1,000 years to build. The great secret of lost civilizations isn't some esoteric mystery. It's a lesson in humility. It's understanding that our own civilization, for all its technology and apparent solidity, is a system too. And that the same forces that acted on the Maya, the Indus Valley, or Easter Island climate, resource management, social crises, are still at work today. There are no guarantees. History doesn't offer any. The only real legacy we can leave behind is the knowledge of our own mistakes and successes, and the hope that whatever civilization studies our ruins next learns something useful from them.